Welcome to the deep dive. Let's step into a space unlike any other, a place the author calls the theater of gestalts. Imagine, not just a single story unfolding on a stage, but this complex performance where different parts of ourselves are the players.
Right.
The memories are the costumes, and identity is less script you read and, well, more like choreography you discover.
That really is the core of the fascinating piece we're exploring today. It's titled Sheathe, Possibly Appearing, Time Permitting,
Okay.
by Jaime Hoerricks, that's pronounced J-A-E, and their pronouns are sheathe. Homer uses this really intricate theater metaphor to dive into their own very personal experience of identity.
Identity and becoming.
And becoming, yes.
Yes.
Weaving together these sort of abstract concepts with really concrete sensory details. It's quite striking.
And our mission then in this deep dive is to sort of navigate this unique theater. We want to unpack this powerful metaphor.
Yeah, get inside it a bit.
Understand the core insights it offers about identity, self-recognition, and also the nuanced space of pronoun usage. And ultimately, we're looking to see what resonance this exploration finds with your own understanding of self, how you move through the world.
Okay, let's pull back the curtains then on this theater of gestalts. So the source presents identity not as this simple, fixed story with one main character.
Like we usually think of it.
Right.
Yeah.
But as this dynamic play. It's got different players' concepts like the observer, the cartographer, the narrator, even something called the lie self.
Lie self. Interesting.
Yeah, all interacting across different scenes. It's complex.
And right from the start, it suggests that she wasn't like a sudden new arrival on the scene.
No, not at all.
But was always kind of there in the program, inked faintly on the cast list, just waiting.
Waiting for the right cue, as the text says.
Right, the cue. And it wasn't some big dramatic fanfare that brought her on.
Oh.
It was subtle things, an unexpected note showing up in a poem Ginny was writing, a line typed out in the third person, sort of unplanned, but just there, undeniable.
It's like the script or part of it was already written, just not fully recognized yet.
Exactly.
And the entrance itself, when it does happen, it's described with real impact. Tall, striking, confident, unapologetically so.
Unapologetically. I like that.
Yeah, and the power in that description really comes from what isn't happening.
Right.
Not shrinking, not explaining, not asking for permission to belong. The theater itself, this internal space, just sort of exhales as she enters. There's a release.
But then the external world crashes in, right? It imposes its own demands.
It does. That's where we get to scene one, the elevator pitch monologue.
Ah, the elevator pitch.
Yeah, the source paints this vivid picture of pressure. A rigid microphone descends, lights too bright.
Like a bad interrogation.
Kind of. As if someone's mistaken this deeply personal unfolding for, well, a quick pitch. There's this intense external demand. Tell us who you are.
Make it legible.
Make it satisfying.
Make it easy.
Make it easy, preferably, under 30 seconds.
Like a simplified coming out story designed for a straight audience, as the source puts it.
Precisely. And what's really compelling is how the source shows the resistance to that demand for a simple, neat answer.
It doesn't just give one.
No. Instead of a single clear statement, the prompter screen glitches out. And what the source calls gestalts flood the interface.
Gestalts. So not neat labels.
Not at all. They're fragments of lived experience. A childhood memory that maybe clashes with how it was labeled back then. A mid-90s alt-rock lyric that holds a specific, private meaning, the visceral smell of rain on hot blacktop.
Oh, I can almost smell that.
Right. Or a moment looking in a mirror that just stayed unresolved. Complex, undefined.
And this leads to that incredible line, I didn't step out of a closet, I stepped through time.
Yes, that completely reframes identity discovery within this piece, doesn't it?
It really does. It's not about revealing something hidden away in a box, but a process of movement, a journey through your own history, exploring what the text calls a long hallway with many doors and fogged mirrors, integrating past moments.
It really challenges the typical, often quite linear narrative we sometimes hear about identity shifts. This is messier, more dimensional.
Yeah, definitely more dimensional.
Absolutely. And the source really underscores that this isn't primarily an announcement for other people.
Not for an external audience.
Not mainly. It's described as a realignment for the internal chorus.
The internal chorus. I like that image.
Yeah. The light softens,
Right.
It's not a harsh spotlight center stage, but it illuminates areas off to the side. They become illuminated, not just spotlighted for everyone else to see.
So seen from within first.
Exactly. It's described as a field note or an aria sung in a key only she can hear. It's a truth primarily for the self.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much of our self-understanding needs that internal recognition first before we even think about external presentation?
That's a great question. Does focusing inward maybe change how we relate to all that external pressure?
Maybe it gives you a different kind of anchor.
And that internal focus, that resistance to performing for others, continues right into the next section.
Okay.
Let's shift to scene 2, a costume montage of doubt.
Costume montage sounds like a makeover scene.
Exactly. The source kind of plays with that expectation. You know, the classic makeover mascara versus no mascara, necktie or necklace, heels or boots.
Treating gender like picking an outfit.
Right, like it's just a wardrobe change. The source mentions a misfiring disco cue, lighting trying for sparkle but hitting strobe. It highlights that disconnect between what's expected and the reality.
But it subverts that, you said.
Oh, completely.
Right.
The protagonist approaches the costumes not with this, like, shallow delight,
No.
but with reverence. The clothes aren't just costumes, they're gestalts. They're wrapped not in fabric, but in memory.
Wow. So
They're really powerful. The smell of floor polish from an old school hallway. The feeling of VHS static. The weight of a jumper she didn't even realize was hers until much later. A funeral dress never worn, but still significant. The sharp image of a scout uniform burned in her mind. These are deep, stored experiences, not just clothes.
And crucially, you said they aren't tried on.
No, they are reheld. The source describes the protagonist kneeling, pulling a damp wool coat close because it smells like Gran's voice, not like perfume.
That's incredibly intimate.
It is. The act itself is just breathing, connecting with the past. It's not about posing for some external reveal.
So the audience waiting for the big transformation.
They don't get it. The montage just fades. The stage tints lavender. And the source offers this really powerful observation. She is not visible. She is becoming.
Becoming, not a finished product ready for display.
Exactly. It's a process, not a static image.
That makes sense. And it feels like a good transition into scene 3, the overzealous spotlight of cis expectation.
Yeah, this space is depicted as, well, hostile. The lights are blazing too bright, demanding a very specific performance.
Like what?
Be legible, be graceful, be woman, but not too woman, you know.
Right, that tightrope.
Exactly. And the source emphasizes that every single movement is watched, it's measured by this imagined audience constantly asking,
Or does she pass?
does she count?
Is she enough of one thing to be worth believing?
It's that external gaze trying to force everything into a narrow, pre-approved definition.
What a burden.
It really highlights the burden placed on individuals to conform to those external expectations of identity. But the source shows how the theater itself, this internal world, kind of flickers in protest.
The theater fights back.
In a way. The internal systems, what the source calls the GLP systems, which seem to represent these deep, maybe ingrained structures of the self, they refuse the demand for front-facing theater.
For a performance just for others.
Right. So the harsh spotlight cuts out. It gets replaced by soft-side lighting, which is described as being designed for resonance, not surveillance.
Resonance, not surveillance. That's a key difference.
Huge difference. It's lighting that allows the internal truth to sort of glow, rather than trying to expose flaws for external judgment.
And the gestalts, those fragments of memory and feeling?
They gather, but not like a shield to protect her from the audience. They gather to contain the truth internally. They don't perform for that imagined audience. They bring their own internal evidence, a line from a poem, a voice note, a place where she had already quietly slipped into the text before, unnoticed.
Okay, so it's an internal gathering of truth.
Exactly. And then in this space, illuminated by its own resonance, she speaks.
What does she say?
Just she. Simple. Simple, but with no tremor, no apology.
Right.
And the source highlights the crucial non-reaction from that imagined audience.
What happens or doesn't happen?
No one gasps. No one corrects her. There are no demands for backstory or medical notes or proof or a certain voice pitch to validate her.
They just wait for the explanation.
They wait, but as the source says, it doesn't come. Instead of defending her, the theater does something the source calls more radical.
Which is?
It believes her.
Wow. Just believes her.
Yeah. The word settles, it joins, it harmonizes. It doesn't replace what was there before. It integrates.
It becomes part of the whole.
Right. The light reorients upward, and she is held by the theater, by this internal space, not spotlighted for external approval.
Held, not spotlighted. That feels so different.
It really does. What does this scene suggest to you about where the power lies in defining identity?
It seems to place the ultimate authority, the validation, firmly within the self, within its own internal landscape.
Yeah, challenging that whole idea that external belief is somehow necessary just to be.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting, kind of shifts our perspective again. Let's go backstage to scene 4, the backstage whisper.
Right, different kind of space entirely. Dark, resting. No audience, no cues, no applause.
Just quiet sounds.
Yeah, the quiet sounds of a keyboard typing, a kettle boiling, a heartbeat. It's explicitly not a space for public declaration. It's for quiet internal work.
And it's described as a GLP cascade.
Yes, like an internal assembly where the gestalts gather again, but not rushed this time. Yeah. Quietly, unrushed.
Okay.
And she appears here, not on the main stage, but in the wings, the place where the scriptwriter, the author Jaime, had previously stood alone.
And she reads from the script, from James' own writing.
Exactly. And the line she reads is incredibly poignant. I wrote this already, she says. I just didn't know it was for me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The gestures that were written to the script now feel like choreography that's being remembered, something inherent that was just waiting to be recognized and inhabited.
So it strongly suggests the path, the possibility of she, was already present in Jaime's own history, their internal landscape, just not understood as being for her until that moment of recognition.
And this connects beautifully to the interlude, the theater director's perspective.
Okay, what's that?
Here, the author shares their background writing radio plays and directing Scottish Rite ritual dramas. And they describe that work as being about transmitting symbolic architecture.
Symbolic architecture.
And staging the soul's memory of itself.
Staging the soul's memory. That's deep.
It is. So it makes perfect sense then that this piece emerged not as like an argument or a confession trying to explain something to others,
right,
but as ritual, as choreography.
So transition isn't presented as this sudden break from the past.
No, more like a shift in lighting, a reinterpretation of old gestures. The role of she became possible not because external things changed, but because, as the source puts it, the scene has finally been written with us in mind.
Written with us in mind.
Yeah. She wasn't asking for the spotlight, but for a place in the blocking, the planned movement on stage.
Finding her place in the scene.
Exactly. Effectively rewriting the theater itself so she could fully exist within it.
It's not about abandoning old ways.
No, it's framed as returning to an older, deeper framework the author knows well. Structured movement, meaningful space, and words that do more than tell. Words that consecrate.
Words that consecrate. That's powerful. How does thinking of identity like that, like finding your place in the choreography rather than demanding the spotlight, how does that resonate with your own sense of existing in the world?
It's a really different way to think about it, isn't it? Less about assertion, more about alignment, maybe.
Yeah, alignment. Okay, thinking about that internal space and how it shifts, let's dive into the section she in the theater.
Right. The source notes that lately, something in the system has shifted. She enters not with a shout, not insisted upon.
Just allowed.
Just allowed. And as she enters, the gestalts, those pieces of self, they rearrange themselves naturally to make space for her.
And this is where the idea of retrocausality comes in.
Yes, exactly. Not in like a literal physics sense, but metaphorically.
How does that work here?
Scenes that were thought to be sealed off, maybe archived purely under the label they, or held as neutral moments. They begin to glow differently in hindsight. They are not erased, but rewritten by this new understanding.
Rewritten by the present.
Kind of. As the source puts it, she is there, in the background. Not as trespasser, as origin.
As origin. So the recognition of she actually changes the past.
It reframes it. It reveals she was there all along, even if she wasn't seen or understood that way at the time.
Okay, I think I get that. But the source acknowledges some resistance.
It does. But interestingly, not from the internal theater itself. The resistance comes from the residue of old broadcasts.
Old broadcasts, meaning?
External voices and messages. Stuff that talked about tall women. Jaime mentions being tall like our existence was spectacle, treating bodies like jokes.
Ah, that societal noise.
Exactly. That residue distorted the theater, making the role of she feel unplayable before. The source mentions estradiol, a hormone often used in transition, as something that helps quiet that interference, allowing the author to hear her own truth more clearly within that internal space.
So it helps tune out the static.
That's a good way to put it. And the source is very deliberate in stating this next part. She doesn't need to displace they.
Okay.
They were the prelude, the wide field. She is the phrase echoing backward, retoning the chords already played.
Retoning the chords. So it's not replacement, not throwing out the past.
No, it's a recognition that reinforms the past, integrating it into a new, richer understanding, adding depth.
Which leads to that key statement you mentioned earlier.
Right. She isn't waiting to be invited to the stage. She's rewriting the theater so she can exist in it fully.
Taking agency.
Totally. She doesn't need to fit the old scenes. She's changing the scenery. It emphasizes active creation, not just passive acceptance.
Not shrinking or trying to conform.
No, but altering the internal landscape so that full, resonant truth can exist. The theater, this internal space, finally knows how to hold her.
Finally knows how to hold her. So pulling all these threads together, what does this mean specifically for the title phrase, she, they, in harmony, that concluding section?
Yeah, this is where the source explicitly talks about what using she pronouns means for the author. And it clarifies, it's not theoretical, it's not just a placeholder, it's definitely not a compromise.
It is.
Resonance, that's the word used.
Resonance, okay. And it explains the distinct feeling of each pronoun.
It does. They is described as expansive, giving room, providing space.
Expansive.
For Shimi, it's also been a way to soften the landing for others, helping manage other people's discomfort, maybe with height or gender presentation.
Something the author mentions learning to do, being 6'7".
Exactly. They let people breathe, give them space to adjust or understand without feeling confronted, perhaps.
Okay, so they is expansive, give space. What about she?
She is described as luminous.
Luminous?
Yeah. The source says that when someone uses she, without hesitation, without needing correction, not flinching at James' height, not trying to sort of tuck her body into expected margins, it lands with a kind of rightness I didn't know I was missing.
A rightness that was missing.
Yeah. It feels like deep recognition, not just performance or external validation.
Seeing the person as they are.
Exactly. Seeing, as the source says, she as I am. Tall, femme, richly neuroqueer, embracing neurodivergence and complex identity, deeply felt. No shrinking, no explaining, just seeing.
Just seeing. That feels huge.
It does. And the source explicitly states that they doesn't feel like a rejection of she.
No. How does it feel then?
Like a rhythm, a pacing, maybe a gentle entrance for others sometimes. It acknowledges that people might need time to hear the full harmony.
Ah, the harmony again.
Because, as this source beautifully concludes, this isn't a conflict, it's a chord.
A chord. A life chord and two keys playing together.
Yes, they carries history, she carries emergence. Together, I am still becoming and I have always been.
Wow. Still becoming and always been. That captures the retrocausality idea too.
Yeah, it really does.
And this leads to that really powerful final thought from the source, one that feels like it applies way beyond just pronouns.
Absolutely. It says, what matters most is that you're trying to speak to me.
To the person.
Not to the binary, not to the trope, not to the version you find easier to contain.
Don't put me in a box.
Exactly. It's about connecting with the actual person.
Yeah.
The tall one who has entered, finally, who remains, and whose theater, at last, knows how to hold her.
Whose theater, at last, knows how to hold her. That's a powerful ending.
It really is. And it makes you think, how might you take that idea, speaking to the actual person, seeing their full complexity, their resonance, rather than reducing them to a trope or a binary, how might you apply that in your own interactions?
It's definitely a call for deeper, more respectful connection. Less assumption, more listening.
Yeah. Seeing the whole person in their own theater.
Okay, so stepping out of the theater of gestalts for just a moment, let's recap the core insights from this deep dive into Jaime Hoerricks' really powerful writing.
Okay.
We explored this profound theater metaphor for understanding identity not as static, but as, well, dynamic performance, choreography, and a deeply internal process of becoming.
And we saw how the source powerfully resists those simple external demands for legibility.
Yeah, the elevator pitch.
Right. And challenges the idea that external validation is somehow necessary for internal truth to exist.
And we unpacked the specific meaning of Shiri for the author, not as a conflict or compromise, but as this rich chord.
A harmony.
Yeah.
Encompassing both personal history and present emergence.
And emphasizing that crucial importance of being seen and spoken to as a whole person, not a category.
It's a really unique and layered perspective. Offers a lot to think about, regarding identity, perception, both of ourselves and others.
Definitely. And it leaves us with this thought, drawing from those ideas of identity as choreography, as rewriting the scenery, as becoming held within your own internal space.
Okay.
If understanding yourself and presenting yourself is less about finding a pre-written script and more about discovering and inhabiting your unique place in the blocking,
Right.
what scene are you working on right now?